You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hi, thanks for coming back once more to the show. I'm Mighty Blue, or Steve Adams, and you are listening to Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Now, this show isn't actually the show I was intending. I'm afraid I got my wires crossed a bit this week, and the person I'd been hoping to interview wasn't available, and by early Tuesday morning, I didn't actually have a main guest. That morning, I'd scheduled my weekly call with Bill, or Mr. President, and he mentioned in a text the previous day that he'd like to respond to some of the points made by Sandi Marra from the ATC on the podcast last week. And by the way, we got some great reaction, and we got some not so good reaction to my interview with Sandi, and you know, this diversity of view is great, is terrific. I wish people would keep it slightly more respectful sometimes, but they just don't. But that's the way it goes. But anyway, he wanted to respond to one or two of those points from Sandi on the podcast. And of course, I'm always up for another point of view. So I thought nothing else other than fine. Well, once we started talking, I realised that Bill not only has something significant to say, but he also has quite the personal story himself. And it was when I was about 17 minutes into our 10-minute chat that I thought to myself, this is the interview for this week. I hadn't prepared for this, and neither had Bill, but we were just chatting, and I think you'll find it interesting, and you'll learn what an accomplished bloke Bill really is. So instead of spending just 10 minutes catching up with Bill after our main interview, Bill will be the main interview. So without Bill, there's no middle section, right? Wrong. Funnily enough, I've been reaching out to Bounce, the bloke we've been speaking with prior to Bill, as I was a bit concerned about how he was keeping. He messaged me back and that he'd love to come back on to give me an update. So after Bill, we're going to have Bounce. Then I've got a couple of announcements, and finally we'll have Chapter 9 of Keith Foskett's book, Balancing on Blue, where the team have reached halfway. So let's get on. Here's Bill Tickner, or Mr. President. As you're going to hear, I suddenly turn our chat into a fuller interview, so apologies for some of my dumber questions. Here's Bill. We're back on with Bill. Hi, Bill. How are you?
I'm good, Blue. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. And we are having the devil's own job trying to connect, aren't we? This is you've got a strange phone going on there, but this is somebody else's phone right now, and this sounds pretty good. And I know at the end of this conversation, you're going to you wanted to respond, as you wrote in your message to me, respectfully to some of Sandi's statements last week. So let's do that in a minute. But let's talk about the hike right now. Last time we spoke to you, you were in Palmerton. Was it Palmerton? Yeah, Palmerton. And then you were moving on and you've moved on now to Duncannon, which means you're through the rocks mainly, aren't you? How's it been for you?
It's been really great. You know, I'm hoping I'm through the rocks because there were rocks right to the very end.
Yeah, I know. Duncannon's where I noticed that long walk across the bridge across the Susquehanna River. If you're going north, in your case, you were going south. That was the beginning of the rocks for me going north. The what seemed to be the bad ones. So hopefully you're okay now. How were they in general for you?
They were tough. I mean, I think I will say that despite the fact that I've heard from so many northbounders that I was going to hate the rocks and hate Pennsylvania, I thought that northern Pennsylvania / eastern Pennsylvania was beautiful. The rocks were hard. My left foot is super bruised. I have to take Advil to be able to walk right now. But
of course.
But other than that, I mean, the weather's been so good here, Blue. It's been in the mid 60s to 70s during the day, and it's been cold at night, a real cold snap. But the views have been stunning. I don't know why people don't talk more about Pennsylvania. To be honest,
I think there are the views when you get them are good. I mean, you mentioned the Pinnacle, I know, and that was a beautiful, beautiful place. I think they're limited personally. I think that lovely walk along on the Superfund site, the climb up the rocks. What was that like for you coming down there? Because that's tough.
It's tough. It's about, again, you can't assume that these rocks aren't going to move when you step on them, which you would think that you could because they're so huge. Yes. But you get pretty good about knowing what's safe to step on. You're careful, and honestly, when you have those things in your mind, you're forgetting. At least for me, I forget how much further I have to go or how hard it is. I'm kind of just focused on the technical piece of the hike, of actually hiking. I love when that happens. It reminds me of Katahdin, right? When you're hiking up so far, but you're actually, it's so technical that you forget that you're hiking up sometimes.
Yeah, and you know what? And I've said about Pennsylvania myself in the past, even though we kind of give it a sort of a jokey hard time. I think every part of the trail is magnificent in its own way. It's tough, there's no doubt about it, and sometimes it's a little bit soul destroying as well. But you know what? That's the trail. It is what it is when it is, isn't it? Whatever's in front of you is what you're going to hike that day. Yeah,
and I will say, Blue, the trail's different depending on when you're hiking it, right? Especially.
Absolutely.
So when you say, you get limited views in Pennsylvania, we've had clear weather, no rain, and because the fall's kind of starting to creep in, the rivers are warmer than the air. So in the morning, you get these low-lying clouds.
Beautiful.
And it is... it's beautiful because at Pinnacle, we saw all these little mountains popping up through the low-lying clouds.
That's
and it looked
amazing.
like you were on an island.
That is amazing.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
Yeah. That's one of the great sights. It does look like the clouds are a sea and all the mountains are poked through a little island. That's fantastic. I love all that. And you wrote a pandemic hiker fast food reality, walking through drive-thrus and super cold weather. Talk to that a bit.
Yeah, well, here's the thing is, depending on what state you're in, fast food restaurants have different policies. Many in Pennsylvania, for instance, you can't go into a fast food restaurant in many of these places. Right. So you have to go into the drive-thru and you have to order as if you're a car.
Oh, nice.
And this comes with a different set of challenges because when you go up to where you order, you don't have the weight of a car that usually indicates that someone's there to order. So you have to get a car to kind of inch up close to you so that you can order. It's funny. And then you walk to the next window and you pay, and you walk to the third window and you get your food, and it's a little bizarre.
Well, you know what? You're doing what you got to do, and that kind of works out. That's fine. And you've had some super cold weather, you say. 3 nights below 40 degrees and frost. This is a bit early for that, isn't it?
This is definitely not normal. We've asked a lot of locals that we've come across, hey, is frost normal technically in summer months? Because today is actually the first day of fall. But
that's true.
This past week, it was technically summer, and we were walking through frost. We were waking up to seeing our breath. We were sleeping with our water filters in case it got too cold and they would freeze. All these things you got to consider when you're actually hiking in cold weather.
Yeah.
So, I get up at around between 4 and 5:30, depending on the day and how many miles I got to do. Mm-hmm. It's a lot colder when there's no sun and it's 37 degrees out.
Oh yeah, no question. And who's we? You still with those ladies?
Yes, I'm with Zippy and Bad Bunny, and I just met a couple other hikers. So I met Styx and Happy Feet, who are also southbounding.
Right.
And we're all having a good time. Getting through these challenging days.
Is that 2 other women as well, or is that a guy and a girl?
Oh, it's 2 guys.
Oh, 2 guys. Okay, fine. Yep. Okay, I wasn't terribly sure. You sent me a picture. Yeah. So is this the new Tramley then?
Oh well, who knows? It's hard to declare Tramley. It's we'll see if they hike faster than us or not. I know that Styx and Happy Feet, they might do the 40. What is it? The 4-state challenge.
Oh God, crazy! Absolutely
so
crazy.
That might, it's to me. I mean, I'm considering it, but it's where you go through Pennsylvania, Maryland, West Virginia, and Virginia in like a day.
That's right.
I don't know that I have that in me right now.
Oh dear me! And I know you said you went to Port Clinton. That climb out of Port Clinton for you going south was pretty steep, wasn't it? Because I know going down it is a nightmare.
It was steep, but you know what gets me through it is I compartmentalize my day. I say, okay, I'm going to climb out of Port Clinton. It's going to be about 1.5 miles of just straight up. Once I get past that, I'm good to go.
Yeah,
and
you're
that's
right.
kind of how it is in Pennsylvania.
That is
right?
true. That is true. Yeah, once you get up on the ridge, you're on the ridge, and it's not so bad. Yeah. So then, tell me, you listened to last week's show, and you're not the sort of person, I don't think, to start screaming and shouting about stuff, but
No.
you took exception a little bit to some of the statements of Sandi. So tell me, what was your thought process, and what made you think otherwise?
Yeah. Well, first, Blue, what I want to say is I have great respect for the ATC and for Sandi. Their mission of protecting, managing, and advocating for the trail is one that I support. I'm especially excited about the fact that Sandi, with her leadership, is trying to bring in diversity and inclusion as a core value as well.
Sure.
So I want to put that there first. That excites me, and that excites most folks that I talk to on trail. Uh-huh. And in the first episode you interviewed me, Blue, I talked about Unfilter the Outdoors, the new nonprofit we're trying to put together to help get minoritized hikers on trail.
Sure,
right?
Sure.
And so I really think we're all in alignment on those things, and that's exciting, right? And that's great. Just real quick before I go into responding to Sandi, just to give a sense of who I am. I know we've talked a little about my background, Blue, but the reason why I think I have a pretty unique perspective, on this year's 2020 hikers is that, for instance, I have, when it comes to the pandemic, it's really important to look at all the available information, right? From this different reports, from the articles and the scientists and the governments and the organizations. So I was a data analyst at Google. I worked at Google for 13 years. I've been trained in how to look at research and data, look at statistics, understand what's relevant, what's not.
Interesting.
So I think I bring that perspective right to this conversation.
Sure.
On top of that, when it comes to the diversity talk, because I do want to address how Sandi brought up diversity in her talk to you a little bit. I told you before, Blue, I'm a hiker who happens to be gay, and I have a lot of experience working in diversity. I've run global pride events for Google in Hyderabad, in Shanghai, in Beijing, in Poland.
I didn't know that.
And yep, I have done all those things. When I was 19. I was in a fraternity. I came out of the closet. I lived out of my car for 6 months and spoke about gay rights at colleges across the country. I was even in the Advocate magazine in May 2000 about my trip.
Right.
So I have a lot of experience with diversity. I also have a lot of experience with leadership. The last 15 years, I've been volunteering and raising money for a nonprofit in California that teaches leadership to high school kids. I've raised over $100,000 for them. Uh-huh. So the thing is, I have a lot of experience in the topics that Sandi was talking about.
Sure.
So I do think that while my perspective isn't the end all be all, I think it's worth listening to. So I wanted to qualify that. Okay. So I do think it was great to hear Sandi's background and where she's coming from. With that said, we'll get right into it. I think the real topic of discussion here that we're really trying to address is this policy that the ATC has put out around not recognizing 2020 hikes. Uh-huh. And, I obviously have a problem with it because I'm on trail.
Well, you heard what I said to her. What I said to her, give everybody an amnesty, get over it, But she obviously wasn't going to do that, and so that is what it is.
Agreed, Blue. And first off, thank you for representing hikers, because I do think that your perspective there is our perspective, and I really appreciate you, having that hard conversation with her, right? So here's the thing. The concern we have in the ATC's response to pandemic, it's specifically the fact that the policy is shame-based, right? And Sandi said a couple of times that she thinks that hikers are simply upset with the policy itself.
Right.
But she's actually misguided there, because our problem isn't with the actual policy. It's with how she came up and how the ATC came up with that policy. So to be clear, if the ATC wants thru hikers off a trail that it doesn't have the authority to close, they need to make a strong case to guide us off the trail, right? And we, as the hikers on trail this year, believe that the ATC and Sandi, they failed to do this. So we're still here, right? And that strong case that needed to happen from the ATC was supplanted by a policy designed to turn us into societal pariahs. We have a problem with that, right? And
I
it may not have been there.
I understand
right?
that. I can understand why you would feel like a pariah, but it may well be they felt, and I'm absolutely no idea whether this is true or not. They may very well have considered that's the best way to do it, to get the maximum effect of getting as many people off the trail as possible. It may not be the case. I'm actually going to ask her to respond to that if she wants to. If she doesn't want to, that's fine. But I think it's quite interesting because I didn't really know that background, and listening to her and all I said was that, frankly, I didn't envy her because the decisions she's making is going to piss somebody off, one way or the other. Yeah. And one thing I learned about management over the years is you just have to make a decision. You may be wrong, and I suspect that anybody who gets 60 or 70% of their decisions correct in a lifetime has done pretty well. So, and I don't think she had any regret about the decision. But so expand upon what you just said then. You thought because you were being made to be pariahs, that was it was a shame-based decision. Do you think that's all it was?
I think it was a shame-based decision, and let me just summarize the case I think Sandi's making to be clear, right?
Yeah.
And some of the points that she makes, I agree with. So one point she made very strongly was that hiker sacrifice to get on trail is irrelevant in regards to whether we should be on trail. I tend to agree with that. Our sacrifices to get here aren't really relevant in whether or not we should be on trail during a pandemic.
Sure.
I'm with her on that. I think most hikers are, right? But she also said that hikers should be ashamed of the privilege that has gotten us on trail. I do not understand or agree with that point. And I'm going to talk about it a little bit, Blue, if you'll give me a minute after this to talk about, the fact that if she's going to bring up a topic of diversity, right, that's really, privilege is an important discussion to have, acknowledging it and working around it. But making us feel ashamed about the privilege that got us on trail, that's something that's going to happen every year. I don't understand why she brings that up in this discussion. It's kind of inappropriate, if you ask me. I thought
it was a very tenuous association at the time, I must admit, yes.
Yeah, it just does have nothing to do with whether or not we should be on trail. So why is she bringing that up? She mentioned single mothers. Hey, we all want single mothers to be on trail. Is she saying that we don't consider that? We don't want that to happen too? It just didn't make sense. I'll talk more about it in a second, but more the meat of the issue, she says that we don't know anything about the virus. That simply isn't true. We have known a lot about the virus since late April. During March and April, when they told folks to get off trail, most of us listened because we didn't know enough to keep ourselves safe, right? But since really late April, we've known so much about the virus, and we've seen other countries defeat it using very simple policies like mask wearing, hygiene, social distancing.
Sure.
The real problem here in the United States is that people don't follow those guidelines, and we have a state-by-state based policy, which doesn't really work in a pandemic. She also makes the assumption that hikers can't maintain proper basic hygiene, which then threatens the communities that we're hiking into. That simply isn't true. It alludes to the fact that maybe Sandi and some of the ATC don't understand the precautions through hikers actually take every single year. Blue, do you know every one of my resupply packages has Purell in it, right? How did I find that much Purell before I got on trail? It was already part of my plan. It's already part of the plan of every thru hiker to stay safe, clean, and and to have good hygiene. It actually isn't as hard as maybe she thinks. This is something that we all have to consider every single year. And those are the things that the science and the data have said.
I must confess, I didn't keep good hygiene at all when I was away. Frankly, I wallowed in the filth of it. So maybe I'm not a good example then in that case.
The most important thing, based on the science and the data, is that you wear a mask so that the droplets that you have that can spread the virus don't go too far from your mouth, right? And the data and the science really supports that if you wear a mask and people and communities wear a mask, transmission is very unlikely, right?
Yeah.
It's also known that outside on the trail, we are not at risk almost at all. There's been like one or two cases in the world that have been shown to have happened outside.
Sure.
So I'm just putting out there that
I would like to say that
narrow it down to.
I do want to say this, that I think that she was right when they first had to make some sort of pronouncement or decision. She was right. Yeah. People did not know enough about it, and I think people have seen the almost a transformation in the knowledge of this disease as time has gone on. So when she was making when those decisions were made, they were made to a degree in a vacuum of scientific knowledge or a limited scientific knowledge that was there at the time. Yeah. So and I think once a decision was made to ask people to get off the trail, it would have been very difficult for them to have changed that decision. So I personally, when I listened to her last week, from my limited knowledge, and I fully concede that you've not got much more knowledge of this sort of thing than I have, but from my limited knowledge, it seemed to me that they made a fair and reasonable decision. I've got to tell you that several people wrote to me after that in support of the ATC, and several people wrote to me after that completely anti the ATC. Like everything else in this country, it seems right now, there seems to be such a diversity of opinion. And one side believes it's right to the exclusion of any other argument. And I think this is just getting worse and worse and worse. However, I think, you have at least a reasoned argument for what you think. And I would love to see her come back and talk about it. Funnily enough, I'm actually talking to the ATC in about half an hour. I just, I appreciate you putting your point of view. Is there anything else you wanted to say about it?
Yeah, just a couple quick little points. Yeah, and just so you know, Blue, I'm with you. I absolutely agree that in March and April, it was the right decision to recommend hikers get off trail, right? Sure. I think that was smart. I delayed my getting on trail. I had a flight to go east on April 1st. I didn't get on trail until they opened Katahdin instead. I decided to change my, based on the ATC's guidance, right, which I thought was appropriate.
And that was the bit I was also arguing about people going southbound. They try to follow the guidelines as much as possible, but then some of the interstate guidelines had changed, hadn't they? So that made it more difficult for people to manage by ignoring the various state-to-state guidelines.
Sure. But you know what, Blue? Here's the thing. I think Sandi mentioned it too. She said, how can you possibly follow state guidelines when, for instance, in Connecticut, you need to self-quarantine for 14 days, right, when you come in the state?
Yeah.
Well, look, I've hiked the PCT and the CDT. I've done a 200-mile food carry. It is absolutely possible to follow all these guidelines. And the ATC suddenly policing us on this is a real change in the direction of how they manage what hikers are doing. Right?
I agree with that.
So
but it was inevitable.
Right?
It was absolutely inevitable this year. That something would have to be said. They couldn't just ignore it and say to everyone, just get on with it. They just couldn't have done, in my view, anyway.
Sure. Now, one more thing, Blue. I think this is important. And again, with all that's been said, I'm still going to support the ATC, and I'm still going to, as a member of the community, I want them to succeed. So as unsupportive of this policy as I am, it doesn't really matter in terms of what we need to do moving forward. Yeah. And to be frank, through hikers, we don't get recognition from the ATC, right? If we did, we wouldn't be on trail right now.
I agree.
Again, which is kind of why that policy doesn't make sense, because it's not designed to really move a through hiker. That's not going to move a through hiker, right? Good information, data, and guidance that is, fact and database is what moves us. And again, that case hasn't been made to us yet. Now, one last thing, and I really want to hammer this one home about diversity, because I think of the whole interview, Blue, what kind of really got me most concerned about where the ATC is heading with Sandi's leadership is about diversity, because I am so excited about the goal it wants to achieve, being more inclusive. But if you're going to bring up a topic like privilege, right? And trust me, I have privilege. I'm a white man who grew up in New England, had a great education.
Sure.
I've been afforded opportunities just because of some of those things, right?
Yeah.
But telling someone like me that I should not be on trail because of those things makes no sense. That kind of a statement divides us as a community. And that is not how we should be bringing diversity and inclusion into the forefront through the ATC. It is very misguided. And here's the thing. Diversity is hard to talk about. So I know that wasn't Sandi's intent. I believe her intentions are good. but intentions don't mean anything if the outcome is bad, right? So,
well, hang on.
Outcome. Oh, yeah,
hang on. I'm actually going to turn this into the main interview. I think this is interesting for me, and I think it makes sense from a certain perspective to hear that other perspective. And once again, one side that didn't like what she was saying the other day would like what you're saying, and vice versa. But that's fair enough. I think a respectful conversation, I think, is very, very worthwhile. So let us posit the fact, or posit the possibility, that you become head of the ATC. Which isn't a possibility right now, but let's say you were.
No.
What would you have done this year? How would you have handled it?
Okay, that is a great question. One that to be frank, I would probably need more time to really come up with the best answer, because it takes time and research to determine that sort of a thing. But the first thing I would do is I would look at all the available data and research, right, to make sure that whatever policy we put in place to address the pandemic is in direct relation to A, the available information out there, and B, the outcome that we want, right? And to make sure the policies we put in place don't do as much harm as they do good, right? So what I would have done...
Hang on. I'm going to ask about... Define what harm was done to this. What is the harm that's done by these policies?
Sure. Absolutely. Okay. So with this policy that was put in place, Blue, when we look at the mission of the ATC, and one of the three things is advocacy, right? Sure. Who are the biggest advocates of the ATC? Who are the most impactful advocates of the Appalachian Trail?
Yeah, some through hikers.
What do you think of it?
Some through hikers. Through hikers.
Well, yes, we go to every single community, right? Yeah. And we respect those communities. We invest in them. We partner with these people. We are a huge part of the mission of the Appalachian Trail Conservancy, right?
Sure.
If you put a policy in place that takes a large, it's not just those of us on trail, Blue, that are impacted. It's folks who are off trail but agree with us who are also impacted by this policy, right?
Hang on. But there is also a constituency of hikers this year who did get off the trail because they believed, they agreed with what the ATC was saying. So once again, it's a difference of opinion, and we can all have there's an expression about opinions which is a bit too rude to say, but we've all got one, know. Yeah. So I probably leave that alone. But everybody has an opinion about this, or is some sort of opinion, and it's informed by their own personal circumstance, I suspect. And I was directly thinking of you when I asked this thing about people who've tried to stick with the rules and gone south, and she did gloss over that a little bit. But a lot of the people, when that guidance came out, did follow what the ATC said because they believed that the ATC were acting in how they believed it to be the best interests of the trail. You don't doubt that for one moment, do you? Right? You don't doubt that for one moment. They didn't do it to piss people off. They did it to do it in a way in which they thought in the best interests of the trail.
Of course, and I think intentions were always good, Blue.
Sure.
I really believe that, which is why, again, I'm not condemning Sandi or the ATC, right? I'm just concerned because leadership, needs to be the right way to motivate people is through positive reinforcement, information, and good guidance. Sure. It's not through a policy that's based in shame that it's not really enforceable, right? I don't see how that's necessarily going to help.
That is, that is the other thing that's really ticked me off this summer. Anyway, this lack of enforceability of stuff, it is toothless. But I would still say the policy was necessary. Whether you believed in how it was done is another thing. But it was necessary to have some policy. They chose a policy and they went with that policy. Their problem was absolute lack of enforceability. And, you then wonder I don't know how you get over that. There is no enforcing of a policy that tells people to get off the trail and they don't get off their trail. They carry on. Hundreds of people carried on this year, apparently.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I also think, a policy like this is based on an assessment of risk, right?
Sure.
And, when it comes to risk, the ATC, for instance, doesn't tell us that we can't get on trail if they don't think we're going to succeed, or that if they think we could hurt ourselves, right?
Sure.
We assume that risk as hikers, and that's how it should be. ATC is not responsible for our health and safety, but they do give us guidance, which is great, right? And so the ATC is also not technically responsible for the health and safety of the communities that the trail goes through, right?
Yeah.
Now, it's still important to give guidance so that we, are as responsible as we possibly can be toward these communities. And so I do think it's important for the ATC to weigh in, right? But at the end of the day, they don't have the ability to enforce anything in that line, in that vein, right?
But that lack of enforceability is partly the problem, and partly the reason they wanted their hikers, let's say the ATC hikers, they wanted the hikers who were on the ATC to stay away from towns because we didn't know sufficiently how this was transmitted. Let's face it, it's only the last day or two that the CDC have put up different guidelines and then took them down again. So there's a lot of misinformation on the TV, on all channels, and from virtually everybody. So a lot of us are operating in something of a vacuum. And I think keeping people out of towns was a good idea because we just did not know whether we were going to spread it. We could have had one person go into towns and been a super spreader. Could have been. I mean, maybe they weren't, but they could have been.
Oh, sure.
Because we just didn't know.
Well, and that's a good point, Blue. And I think one of the things that you and Sandi talked about in the last episode is, I think Sandi said that she kind of characterized in a way that hikers assume that we're invincible, we don't have the virus. That's not the case. We all assume we have it, right? We've known about asymptomatic spread since April. Yes, there were some governors, like the governor of Georgia, who said he didn't know that it could be asymptomatic spread, right?
Yeah,
come on.
Leave that
we all
knew.
Yeah, it's insane. We all assume we have the virus, and that's how we operate, right? Which is why the risk of us spreading it is so low.
Well, that's what I want to ask you. Have you observed that? Have you observed how careful people have been since you've been on the trail? Oh,
yeah. Everybody has masks, and here's the thing. I have replanned my hike like 3 times. Right? I planned it in the fall. I planned it in April, or in March before I was going to get on trail in April. And then when I realized I had to get on trail, going southbound, I replanned it again. And I literally, Blue, I have a spreadsheet. I have every single stop I'm going to make, every hostel I'm going to stay at. I called every single one of them. I said, are you still going to be open? Do you want us to come? What are your policies for safety around COVID? I want to make sure I follow them. Can you accept a package so I can not have to go into town and shop if it's possible? I do all those things.
But hang on, Bill.
I share that spreadsheet with many hikers.
Yeah, Bill. Yeah. You are definitely an exception. There's no way more than half the people I met on the trail last year, more than 90% of the people were not as responsible as you seem to have been. You can, we can all wish for a perfect world and people to be perfectly well behaved, but you know what, especially guys are like when they all get together. A lot of the rules go out the window, and I'm not saying that everybody was not responsible, and I'm really glad you're saying and that from your observations, people have been responsible. So I think that's a great thing that people have been responsible, and I think it's very important that listeners and the ATC hear that as well, because we would not want bad, not so much. We would want them to get a fair reflection of what's going on trail. And if you're saying to me from your observation as an intelligent guy that it's been well observed, or the pandemic, the hikers have been observing the danger of the pandemic well, and that's good for us, good for everybody to hear.
It is, Blue, and that's, again, this is why like the conversation about this policy and the conversation of diversity do kind of relate, because one key tenet of diversity work is we don't make assumptions about people, right?
Sure.
That is dangerous. And there are some assumptions being made about those of us on trail that are not correct and that are divisive. We are not taking this lightly. We are taking the virus very seriously. We are assuming we have it. We are taking precautions. Every hiker I've met, same thing, and, are we upset that the shelters are closed and that we shouldn't use the privies? No, it doesn't matter. We're taking that seriously. Right. We have tents. We have shovels to dig cat holes.
Sure.
These things, we are taking precautions that we don't take on other years on the AT.
Well, my experience of through hiking is that through hikers were the ones who caused the least issues. It was often day hikers and maybe the odd section hiker, but mainly day hikers who were relatively careless about one or two of the litter things. I didn't see any bad behaviour, literally none, when I was on the AT last year, and I was on there for nearly 6 months. So, I think through hikers get an unfair rap sometimes, so I'm really pleased that we've had the chance to do this. I strongly suggest that you reach out to Sandi at some stage when you finished and just say, can we have a chat? I'm sure she'd welcome that conversation, particularly in terms of diversity. You've got a point of view. Put it, you've put it here, and I think the more we have these conversations, I can tell you right away, some people are going to be pissed off with this, me making this a main interview.
Oh yeah,
but I don't care.
I know.
And the reason I don't care is because it's a conversation we started, just me catching up with you on how you're doing and so on. But you have a point of view which I think is important to be a counterbalancing point of view to what everybody heard last week, and I just wish people would listen to both these interviews side by side, without being judgmental on either side, and see that there are definitely points on both sides, because I think you can see it also that she had some points which you agreed with, and I'm sure she will see that you've had some points that she agrees with. At the end of the day, though, one thing I have learned about leadership in my lifetime is that you have to make these decisions. Whether you're right or wrong, you have to make a decision. I think you probably agree with that. You can't be wishy-washy about a decision. The decision is this is what we're going to do, and she's led people in that direction. Whether you agree with that direction or not, she's made that decision. If you have some input and some data that supports a different direction, it's incumbent upon you, in my view, as an AT through hiker, to contact her and say, I'd like to talk about this, and I'm sure she would listen.
Yeah. Sure. Well, this is my official invitation to Sandi. I'd love to chat with her, and I'd love to go on a hike with her. And I especially want to thank her and the ATC for bringing diversity and inclusion to the forefront. I know that's it can be a controversial topic. It shouldn't be, but it is. Yes. A lot of hikers think that discussion doesn't belong on trail. But I would of course love to talk about some of that work and how I can support them. And of course, as we roll out Unfilter the Outdoors, the nonprofit to help get minoritized hikers on trail, I think that, and the ATC may even know about that at this point, because I think some of our members, are on the ATC or at least connected to them. So I just think there's a lot more partnership opportunities. So moving forward, Sandi and I are probably not going to agree on this policy. That's okay. Guess what? We live in a world where we live in a country, right? The United States is a country where it was born of the idea that all beliefs should be protected, right? And that we need to live in a society where different religions can be here, different points of view can be here. We've strayed from that as a country a little bit, but I think, now's the time to get to move back to that.
But we still hate England, don't we? we kicked England out, which of course I really appreciate. Oh dear. Well, look, I say I'm gonna have this as the main conversation today, and next week you're back in your day job. But I think if other things occur to you this week that you want to air those things, I still want to talk about your hike, but I just think it's been a good conversation. Neither of us was prepared for it, so I kind of like the way in which it just unfolded. We've spoken for about 36 minutes, so that's fine. But I think it was important to have, and I'm glad that you raised it, and I appreciate you coming on, and I hope you have another great week on the trail.
Wait, Blue, you have any warnings for me about the next section?
No, I think you're okay now. It's all downhill. It's all dead easy now.
Okay.
You're gonna no,
Great
actually, I tell you, Duncannon. You're in Duncannon now. That was the day when I was with Trigger last year. That was the biggest day we had. We did 26 miles from Duncannon, or we went it the other way. We went from Boiling Springs to Duncannon, which was 26 miles. I loved that walk. So I think you're going to enjoy that as well. It's nice and flat through a few fields, and it's lovely. Yeah, and Boiling Springs is beautiful as well.
Yeah. Oh, good. Well, we plan to probably do the ice cream challenge. It's like a half-gallon challenge.
Oh, don't do that. Don't do that. I was violently sick when I did it. It was horrible. It was really horrible. Only stupid people of my age did that sort of thing. I mean, the youngsters just said, I'm not doing that, but I did it. I then had pasta and I was sick that night and I was off trial for 2 days. It was a nightmare for me. But, you go and enjoy it. Knock yourself out, man. All right, mate. Well, I've got to go. But
awesome.
It's been great to talk to you, and I really appreciate you being open about this. And we'll talk again next week anyway. All right?
Sounds great, Blue. Thanks.
Cheers then. Bye.
Take care.
Wow. He worked for Google for, 15 years? He is super smart, and he's got a view. I think Sandi was excellent last week, but I was glad that Bill got the chance to push back a little. He was respectful, and really, it would do all of us a lot of good if people could just have a respectful dialogue about trail issues. There's been too much mudslinging on social media, on both sides, to get a really proper view of either side of the issues. I hope that you agree that it was worth hearing more from Bill. Now, before we get caught up with Bounce, I wanted to share something with you all. First, I'm actually going to read something from the second chapter of my own Appalachian Trail story called Creaking Giza Hidden Flagon. This is the second volume and concerns meeting somebody at the Greymore Friary, which is in New York. When I read it, I'll tell you why. In the morning, idly sipping my coffee and spooning down my oatmeal, I spotted an older black guy, no pain, so I wandered over for a chat. He'd hung his hammock just away from the field in the woods. He told me he had done the trail several times before and entertained me with several stories of the changing generations he'd met over the years on the AT. No Pain admitted to being a loner and looked regretfully sad to me. He shared with me that he had a family somewhere, though he didn't seem in any great hurry to reconnect with them. Given my rather fractured relationship with my younger son, I felt for him. He stayed in my thoughts for quite a while after that one occasion when we met. Now, why did I read you that? A few weeks ago, I was skimming through Facebook, as you do, and I saw a post that had a picture of a guy, and I immediately recognised No Pain. Unfortunately, it was a missing poster, and I'm going to share it in the show notes. Above the poster was this message by Tamika Easterday. It said, "This is my daddy. Please share and pray for our family during this difficult time. If you have any information, anything at all, no matter how insignificant, our family asks that you contact the numbers listed. Thank you, and God bless you." So, No Pain is missing, and he's been missing since December last year. As I wrote, he stayed in my mind since that one occasion, so I reached out to Tamika and asked her permission to share his missing poster in the show notes. Please take a look and see if you recognise him. He's obviously spent quite some time on the trail, and being a black guy is quite recognisable out there. I really hope that this ends well for No Pain, Tamika and her family. And by the way, she knew he'd been mentioned in a book somewhere, so I sent her a copy of my books, and I think she was grateful to get them. So now let's hear from Bounce and what he's been up to in Rangeley. Oh, we're on again with Bounce. Hi, Bounce. How are you?
I'm excellent.
Good. Are you well? Are you physically well these days, or how's that part of your life going?
Yeah, I'm pretty healthy. Pretty lazy for this past month and a half, but I'm gonna get back into a good exercise routine here on the 1st. Just take a couple months off. Yeah, you sent me a message saying you're doing a bit of local hiking and exploring. Did you consider going back? I know you were thinking of going back on the trail to try to finish. How's that stand right now? Yeah, I'll tell you, like on some days it's like I might just do it, but I'm pretty set on finishing next spring.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, that's fine.
Had some friends come through. I had some friends come through yesterday that Odie's hiking out with.
Right.
Oh, man. I really almost wanted to go. It was bad. I was like,
I can't imagine you'd let anybody go once you know, but I don't know what it is about the trail. It just seems to infect people, doesn't it? They get that feeling. Everybody turns up and that. So you're saying all the hikers come through Rangeley, or they're not that many these days?
Not that many, but because of having the YouTube channel and also hiking 2 years in a row, I know a lot of people. So
right.
A few times a week, some people will stop in the Onion and that I know, or I probably see a hiker every other day.
And where are you living right now then?
I live with Skinder. I rent his basement. Skinder's the owner of the Onion.
All right.
We spoke about him before. He's almost 90. Still, he could probably hike the trail. I mean, this guy's great. He's in great shape.
Cool. Now, wasn't there somebody else in the Rangeley with you that was hanging out there as well?
Yeah, there's actually two other hikers here. Trekker, who hiked. He hiked from Alabama and then the Appalachian Trail and stopped here. That's who I hang out with most of the time.
Right.
That's who I go hiking with. I think a lot of other hikers might know him because he worked at a lot of hostels on his way up.
You actually wrote something quite interesting when you wrote to me. You said that it's something to do with when building relationships with others, miles seems to be more valuable than minutes. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, it's just that, I've now got the time to compare and contrast of the two environments.
I'm sure.
Being on trail and in a trail environment, I know people for 100 miles that are my friends now, probably for life. They've been friendships for 2 years.
Sure.
I've met people where I've known them, and 100 miles is what, 5-6 days? Yes. I've known now people in this town for a month and a half. I barely know them. It's a different extreme contrast.
Yes, it is. And I was funny enough, I was thinking about exactly this the other day with Trigger. I hiked with a lot last year, obviously last 1,700 miles. And even though we don't see each other, he's going to be special in my life for the rest of my life. He absolutely is, because I've shared that so much of the trail with him, and you're with him almost 24/7, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, and you get to see the whole person. It's not just where we can hide back in our little holes in our homes and our privacy. You see the whole person. You see them in the morning, in the evening, in the lunch, when they have struggles, good days, bad days, bad weather.
Yes. Yeah, the more I think about it, the more of a test it really is as well. Yeah. So you decided to go again next spring. Is that with somebody, or what's the reason behind that?
That's always been my goal, is to, the whole YouTube channel was to film someone else in the screen. So if that occurs, that would be, I don't want to put too much on that goal, but because it's human relationships and they're complex. But yeah, I would definitely prefer that.
So what have you been doing? You say you're working, obviously, in the Red Onion. What have you been doing with your time? I mean, what sort of life is this for you? Is it because where you were before, you were in business before, weren't you? And Rangeley is a pretty quiet place, and so on. So what is this new way of life for you? What does it mean for you?
I'm just feeling it out. So the primary business is 20 restaurants here. So, I started in a kitchen and started washing dishes, and now I'm working my way around.
Right.
Learning the restaurant industry. I talked to another one of the local restaurants and work there too, so I can get a contrast of the two different types.
Right.
I'm taking it very slowly. I made some friends in the area, just kind of hanging out. I'm writing a book, so it's more of a let me take things in very slowly and make sure it's what I want. Not necessarily do things just out of necessity. I'd rather stay and struggle for a little longer and make sure everything around me is the right thing around me.
So stay and struggle is still the thing, is it?
Yeah. I just I don't feel like I've quite learned everything I need to learn. I stopped here for a reason, and the COVID 2020 hikers, the ones that stayed on the trail, I don't even have to explain it to them. They totally get it.
Right.
They understand the adventure. They understand what I was doing. It's a lot of times the other people that are goal oriented, like that, you know, maybe the trophy hunters, or, you know, they had this objective. You know, my objective is and always been to find a base camp, and then I want to explore from there. But, you know, to move around all the time for like I did for the past 20 years.
Yeah.
I met a lot of people, but I haven't left 10 miles outside of Rangeley since I got here, and I have a truck. So,
Wow.
I mean, I'm not into, I want to explore the area I'm in, and I'm kind of getting comfortable in just the local small environment.
There's some terrific hiking there, though, isn't there? I mean, it was fantastic. I loved it round there. I really did.
Yeah, I've only experienced probably 10% of the local trails. I mean, There are trails everywhere. There's snowmobile trails. They go in and out of town. You can go all the way to Canada on snowmobile trails. So
that'd be cool.
It's going to take me time to explore this.
And you say you're writing. Is the writing related to your hike, or is the writing related to other parts of your life?
Oh, the hike's a big part of it. I mean, a lot of the awareness and the understanding came from the hike. But it's really the journey. You know, how did this kid that from a small town that really didn't know anything have one event, 9/11, put me on this trajectory to where here I am in Rangeley, living with a man that the U.S. military shot at when he was a child.
Oh my gosh!
It's kind of just it's just pretty an incredible thing. Like, you know, when we pushed through. He went to go get bread and, you know, some other food supplies because he figured, you know, you're going to need at least food. And we shot at him on going over a bridge.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Hear me. Okay. Well, look, you know, I'm glad you sent me a message the other day to tell me you're okay and let me know. I've tried to, I've reached out to you a couple of times and we've had a couple of texts back and forth. You know, just hopefully you're going to stay strong. And when you do get back on the trail, if you get back on the trail, there's obviously you do what you want to do when you want to do it. But if you do get back on the trail, I'd love to know that that you're back on it and you're still staying well. That's the important thing. You're still staying well.
Yeah, no, it was great to hear from you and talk to you also. I appreciate you keeping the updates.
Okay, buddy. Well, you take it easy.
Yeah,
right?
I will do that.
Stay safe. Stay safe.
Right.
Okay,
talk
man.
to you soon.
Take it easy. Bye.
All right, you too. Bye.
Hiking the trail or any trail allows you an introspection that can go very, very deep. Bounce is looking for something else, and Rangeley turned out to be his place to look further for it. I'm going to keep reaching out to him, and perhaps we'll see him on Katahdin sometime next year. You never know. As always, I want to thank those of you who have been supporting the show. This week, we've got a donation from one of our monthly donors, Vicky Thomason, who, coincidentally, has also just friended me on the Walk the Distance app that I mentioned the other week. Apparently, I'll get notified when she passes me on the trail. So thanks to Vicky, and if any of you are thinking of supporting the show to help keep it going, please, please, please go to hikingradionetwork.com, click on one of the donate buttons, and you'll be able to play your part in the continued success of the show with either your PayPal account or your credit card. Thank you so much. Finally today, Fozzie has reached the halfway point, but not without a potentially nasty injury. I'll see you next week. Chapter 9, Halfway Done. June the 1st to June the 16th, mile 800 to 1089. For amusement, I scored trail towns according to various criteria: amenities, appearance, compactness, quality of the restaurants, cafes and such like. Hot Springs received top marks after my stay there and remained in pole position. Its old red brick buildings reminded me of home. The artisan gallery and cafe tended to my coffee needs and most conveniences were nearby. Damascus came a close second, and I'd enjoy more wonderful places as I hiked north. On initial inspection, Waynesboro wasn't one of them. Although historic, its uninspiring buildings didn't stimulate my senses. It was spread out, which meant walking to shop, do laundry, eat and complete the usual errands. It's ironic how through hikers can negotiate several thousand miles without grumbling, but ask them to walk on a rest day and they'll think you're insane. Juggles, goggles, Thirsty and I shared a room at the Comfort Inn. At the laundrette with bush goggles, I realised we had no spare clothing to wear, as usual because most of our gear needed washing. We sat wearing dangerously small discarded towels around our waists, crossing our legs tightly. Relaxing over a beer in the room, I became curious about Juggles. His email address was associated with his website, so I took a look. "Damn!" I cried. Bush Goggles paused from eating his fish food, spoon in his mouth. "What's up?" he spluttered. "Juggles was a world champion," I exclaimed. He dropped his spoon. "No shit. No shit. If you're going to be world champion at something, juggling scores well for originality." Gabrielle had travelled to Waynesboro with her son Max for their week's AT taster. I'm nervous when friends join me on hikes. They bring luxuries like dark chocolate and proper coffee, but others joining through hikers often doesn't work out. 2 months into any trail and we're in amazing shape, approaching the top of our game. Muscles are powerful, lungs breathe efficiently, and feet have hardened. When eager-eyed individuals enter the fray, it can go wrong. Mileage plummets, breaks are frequent, and the pace drops. Despite this, I was keen to see them both, and compromise was inevitable. Gabrielle arrived in my life when I had figured out what I wanted from it. She'd advertised for seasonal help on the farm in exchange for food and board. I'd returned from walking El Camino de Santiago in Spain. England was cold and damp, and I needed warmer climates for a few months at minimal expense. She replied positively to my email, so I jumped on the next plane. A spiritual person, she lived healthily, exercised and enjoyed a raw food diet. With a positive world view, she turned the farm around from difficult beginnings. I cherished wonderful memories from my time there and left rejuvenated after amazing food, honest hard work and the opportunity to both reflect and plan for the future. Under his mother's guidance, Max had flourished. He was only 12 when I'd first met him, and I struggled to believe this 22-year-old man was the same person. Softly spoken, with a gentle demeanour, he was easy to get on with. They were eager to taste the AT for a week. I'd deliberately chosen the easier terrain in Virginia, and now into June, the weather had improved. We started late, managing 7 miles before reaching the Calf Mountain Shelter. Gabrielle hiked well, always in eyesight, but Max struggled. They'd started well, but he'd drained rapidly. The shelter perched on a 3,000-foot peak, tucked in a dark hollow. Wise Guy, Socks, Atlas and others milled around. Gabrielle and Max needed little guidance, pitching their tent and setting up camp. They made friends whilst cooking dinner. We ignored a few raindrops creeping through the canopy and congregated around the fire, our bodies flickering silhouettes onto the rocks. I had faith in my new companions. They'd researched their gear, knew how to use it, and trained in preparation. However, on day 2, progress deteriorated. I had slowed to accommodate them, and although Gabrielle progressed well, Max had problems. I took regular breaks, guiding and looking after them. Gabrielle stayed with me, but Max dropped further back. 3 miles into the day, I reached the Turk Mountain Trail junction with Gabrielle. We waited. The weather turned for the worse, alternating between drizzle and heavy rain. The temperature plummeted. It didn't feel like the start of summer. We kept peering through the tree tunnel behind us until a lone, sodden figure emerged through the mist with a pronounced hobble. I looked at him. He looked pale. "Max, you okay?" He sat, looking forlorn. "No, my legs hurt and I'm tired." He put on a brave face, nibbling at energy snacks as Gabrielle delved into a bag of natural remedies. I tried persuading him to reach the Black Rock hut, a further 10 miles away, making 13 for the day, but his engine needed oil. We reached the road and they attempted to get a ride as I carried on. I hoped a decent meal, rest and a shower would revitalise him. We agreed to rendezvous at the hut later. Despite Max's struggles and the constant rain, I appreciated solitude's return. Energised, I toyed with my legs' power limits, flirting with my lactic thresholds. I eyed hills as a boxer would an opponent. Without breaking pace, my eyes focused on the ascents: steepness, camber, length, condition and obstacles. My head, drunk with excitement, calculated the optimal form of attack. I hit them hard, attacking without mercy, and ascended higher, laughing at my ability to dip in and out of my limits. Planting one foot at the intended point, I knew it would hold and scanned the next landing option. On the rock? The tree roots? Maybe not, they looked slippery. Risk the wet dirt? Will my shoes cope with the camber? I trusted my decisions and stormed on, repeating the process over and over. Bam, bam, bam. Again, I want more. Reaching the limit, legs screaming, I held it there, dealt with the pain, flirted with my boundaries and discovered my capabilities. As my psychological and physical sides united, I revelled in the sweet moments when it all came together. The judgments, speed and concentration merged into flashes of epiphany. Like a trance, a meditation, the outside world vanished. My world centred 15 feet ahead on a classic hiking trail where nothing else mattered. I passed 3 women. Peeking from under my umbrella, I nodded a greeting. "Didn't you pass us earlier in the downpour?" one asked. I paused. "Yes, I did." "And you're still smiling?" I grinned cheekily. I smiled and acknowledged anyone I met because I liked others doing the same to me. However, despite the rain and cold, I realised I was having a grand time. Contentment visited rarely in my everyday life, but frequented often in the outdoors. I belonged outside. A friend once collected me from the airport after 3 months hiking, and he asked what my plans were now I was home. "I'm not home," I replied. "The trail is home, and I've left it." My joy stemmed from freedom. The AT had regulations like town, but escaping to the wilds offered a barrier between 2 different worlds. We were still governed by society, but on our side of the boundary, amongst the trees, we easily forgot. We once lived in nature. I believe rekindling that connection returns us to true freedom. In a dusty crevice of our minds lies a forgotten union. Somewhere, subconsciously, we remember the woods, and spending time there revives those distant times. The woods were home. The Black Rock hut nestled in a clearing off trail. It slept 6, and arriving first, I grabbed a place in case the rain, which had finally stopped, returned. I couldn't see Gabrielle or Max. My phone lacked a signal, but I assumed they got a ride and were warming up in a motel somewhere. I relaxed with a cigarette. A twig cracked and instinctively I looked. A bear paused 50 feet away, appearing to berate its mistake. It saw me and carried on. Curious, I followed it, keeping my distance until it disappeared amongst the trees. An unfamiliar face had arrived at the shelter when I returned. "Did you see the bear? Hey, I'm Hotshot." We shook hands. "Yes," I confirmed. I was concerned it was heading towards the trail, but it veered off. "You ain't from round here, are you? Where are you from? Britain?" "Oh, crikey, not again. I'm English. Name's Fozzie. Nice to meet you." Hotshot didn't pursue the nationality topic, but we did discuss bears. He'd been the victim of a bluff charge where a bear runs at you but usually backs off. We're supposed to stand our ground to appear strong. Hotshot stayed put, but he described it as the scariest moment of his life, comparing it to standing on a railway line when a train's coming. The bear wasn't worrying me, but the gigantic spider inside the shelter was. A hiker called Boots occupied the top bunk, below what he identified as a wolf spider. He smiled, unperturbed, claiming it was looking after him. We don't have big spiders in the UK, and I kept a close eye on its location, sleeping fitfully. I didn't listen to music often, preferring nature's sounds. However, there are a few better methods to increase the hiking tempo than listening to an upbeat tune. I selected the Stranglers playlist, and as Mercy tugged at my eardrums, my stride matched the rhythm. The trail skirted around Black Rock summit, smoothing a path through a crazy mixture of boulders. "Fozzie!" I turned to see Juggles trying to catch up. "Damn, you hike fast," he gasped, sweat speckling his brow. I chuckled. "Blame the Stranglers. What's up?" He chugged his water and sighed. "Message from Gabrielle. They're bailing." "Shit. Where are they?" "At the Black Rock parking area." I was part surprised but accepted the sad news. The minor consolation was hiking freely again. Bush goggles showed, and our trio paused at the Loft Mountain wayside, enjoying a sorely needed burger and fries with a blackberry shake chaser. Bush goggles complained about his lack of sleep in the shelters, blaming the snorers, or snorchestra, as he'd named it. I sympathised. Some hikers kept others awake, with synchronised ensembles echoing off the wooden walls. I stayed in my tent except for bad storms, but the snorchestra wasn't my only problem. Shelters weren't renowned for their spacious interiors, and often we slept on raised platforms. The roofs sloped to meet these platforms, where I'd hit my head, forgetting about the gap between both. Nursing bruises, I now refer to the shelters as headaches. Weaving 105 miles from Front Royal to Rockfish Gap through the Shenandoah National Park, we intersected Skyline Drive several times. Described as one of America's most scenic routes, it was popular with cyclists and motorists. To our delight, waysides, rest areas which served food, abounded. We enjoyed regular hot meals, so we carried less supplies. We crushed good mileage with our lighter packs, kinder terrain and full stomachs. Our fatigue subsided and happiness rocketed. AT hikers love the Shenandoahs. The elevation changes are minimal and the views over Virginia stunning. Home to a variety of wildlife such as deer, black bear, bobcat, raccoon, skunk, fox and rabbit, those hills stayed in my memory. Bush Goggles, Juggles and I hightailed it up Weaver Mountain, bumping into Squatch ascending. We rested as he filmed footage for Flip Flop Flippin' 2, whilst Juggles plied his trade in the background. Spending the night in the shelter, we discussed pushing ourselves with an early start to pull in a decent mileage. We started full of vigour at 7 a.m. With stunning weather, a smooth path and aided with ibuprofen and 5-hour energy drinks, we flew along. By 8 p.m. we pulled into camp after 30 miles, bringing our tally to 928. Approaching halfway after 69 days, Harper's Ferry was close. The mornings proved exquisite. The dew dampened the soil to dark brown, lightening as the sun stole the moisture. Rhododendron leaves speckled the ground, their red and yellow coats crunching underfoot. Birds chirped, rabbits scampered and rustled as an occasional breeze lifted the tree canopy. Solitary clouds drifted like lonely spectres. I joined Bush Goggles and Juggles most days, but we also enjoyed our solitude. We strived to cover distance, agreeing to reach Harper's Ferry on June the 11th. Over 3 days I'd covered 90 miles, making inroads into the mileage deficit. I continued through the Shenandoahs, cresting the Pinnacle, Pass Mountain and Compton Peak before descending to US 522. My eagerness to pull in miles stalled as I passed the Jim and Molly Denton shelter. The wide veranda and tables and chairs tempted me to a premature overnighter. Resisting, I met my indecision halfway and succumbed to the solar-powered shower and a laundry session. This could catch on, Fuzzy. Nip into town, eat, resupply, grab a shower and wash your clothes somewhere at the same time. Long stops could be history. 5-hour energy drink, known as rocket fuel, became popular with hikers because it's small size and lightweight. I downed one with 2 ibuprofen, hoping they'd argue with my sore shin, and sped off to the Rod Hollow shelter, eager for another 30-mile day. It proved a big mistake. I left at 1:30 p.m. with 18 miles to cover. The first 4.5 miles took just an hour. I savoured a balanced rhythm over easy terrain, my trekking poles synchronised with my stride, breathing perfect, focus concentrated. In 2 hours I'd covered 9 miles. With no need to rest, I revelled in my ability to devour distance. Sweating, I wiped my shirt over my face and dried my hands on my shorts. My shin ached, but I ignored it, the trail flashing beneath me until the shelter turn-off signalled day's end. Buzzing and soaked in the afternoon's excitement, I'd hiked 18 miles, fully loaded, in a little over 4 hours. 2 hikers sat at the table outside. I recognised one of them. He recognised me too. "Fuzzy, what's up?" "One Speed. Hey, I'm good. How the hell are you?" "Doing great." I'd last seen him in Irwin, where we'd shared a motel room. "This is Medic," he added, motioning to the woman next to him. We shook hands. "Let me get camp ready and I'll be back." After 10 minutes sitting, my body had cooled. I reached for the jacket in my rucksack as pain shot through my shin. Wincing, I ran my hand over it. It was tender and swollen. "You okay?" inquired Medic. "Not sure. Does your trail name hold any relevance to your profession by any chance?" She laughed. "Yes. Here, let me look." I gingerly raised my leg and rested it on the seat beside her. She ran her hands over it. "Any problems with your shin before?" "No, never," I replied. "How's your day? Did you take it easy or push yourself? Did you fall?" "No, but I pushed hard." She finished her diagnosis. "This isn't my specialised area, but being a hiker and a runner, I know about sport injuries. I'm pretty sure it's a shin splint." Her words reverberated round my skull like a piston failure spitting metal fragments around an engine. I'd heard of shin splints, realising if severe it could stop a hike. I cursed for testing my limits. Damage to the connective layer of tissue which covers the shin bone, or periosteum, resulted in inflammation. Several factors cause it. Overpronation, rolling the feet, during hiking or running is one, but it's often caused by intense exercise and asking too much of the body. Even at the peak of physical fitness, we can still push too hard, and that's what I'd done. I contemplated a forced rest, falling behind and losing track of my friends. Medic saw my disappointment and tried placating it. "Don't worry," she said. "It might not be serious. Be positive. There's a nice cold spring over there. Hold your shin under it for at least 10 minutes and take ibuprofen. This will reduce the swelling and aid healing. Stretch it out and consider new shoes. They might help. You may need rest, but I've seen people in this situation and the following morning they've hiked off with no problems. Use the cold water in the creeks when you can. If it's okay tomorrow, carry on. Gently." I hobbled to the spring, let the water tumble over my leg and swallowed an ibuprofen. The pain subsided as I ate dinner, before sliding into my hammock for a night's rest. The roller coaster was a 13-mile section, 16 miles before Harper's Ferry. Its description is perfect, and whilst the series of ascents and descents weren't severe, there were lots of them. Halfway through, I eased off my sedate pace and held my shin under a creak. Amazingly, it wasn't hurting. Bush Goggles joined me for the afternoon. We rested, appreciating the view from Raven Rocks with a new face, Dr. Attractive. As she left, he took off in hot pursuit. I've explained blue blazing, the term for taking a side trail. Another is yellow blazing, taking the road to cut off a section, so called because of the yellow lines. Bush Goggles had indulged in pink blazing, when hikers increase speed or slow to hike with a potential love interest. I called him at the Virginia and West Virginia border, the 1,000-mile mark. He looked forlorn, so I didn't push the subject. The lights of Torlone's Pizza and Bar glimmered from the road. We entered, ordered a Jack Daniels and Coke each, and slumped in one corner, asking the waitress to keep a watchful eye on our drinks. "Feel free to replenish them," I said, smiling. We drank, ate, and worse for wear, staggered off to find camp. We had just 5 miles to Harper's Ferry in the morning. The mercury tickled 90 degrees with humidity chasing. The first call was the Appalachian Trail Conservancy on Washington Street. Most hikers stopped there, and the staff insisted on displaying everyone's photo. I had high expectations of Harper's Ferry, which I'd read about during my research. The most famous trail town, many considered it the halfway mark, although the actual point was 72 miles further on. It met my hopes, nestling at the confluence of the Potomac and Shenandoah rivers. Crossing the Byron Memorial Footbridge, I left West Virginia and into Maryland, the 6th state on the AT. Harper's Ferry is bathed in history and named after Robert Harper, who settled there in 1747. In 1761, he established a ferry service across the Potomac, drawing settlers heading west into the Shenandoah Valley. Thomas Jefferson visited in 1783, referring to it as perhaps one of the most stupendous scenes in nature. Thirsty, Juggles, Goggles and I stayed a mile from the town centre, so it took time to reach the amenities, but it didn't bother us. The streets rose and fell, bordered by old rickety wood and red brick-fronted houses, their front gardens speckled with summer flowers. The surrounding hills kept sentinel as we feasted at restaurants and drank at the bars. Harper's Ferry surpassed my expectations. We spent our time resupplying with food and filling our stomachs with 3 nutritious meals. My shoes, having lasted well from the start, deteriorated after 1,000 miles. I'd purchased a fresh pair in Waynesboro and mailed them to the Harper's Ferry post office. My new shoes were light trail runners, and although I doubted their durability, I looked forward to the comfort. The guys were in wonderful spirits. Our room became swamped with piles of dirty laundry, mail packages, beer bottles and pizza boxes. We utilised many anchor points to hang damp clothes. Not noticing the aroma until returning from town trips, we held our noses as we entered. The cleaners, bless them, never complained, and we tipped them well. We left late after breakfast at the town inn. Sporting new shoes, T-shirts and laundered gear, including rucksacks, we could have been day hikers if our beards hadn't given us away. Excited to arrive in town, the elation didn't match the buzz of returning to the woods. The trail ran parallel to Shenandoah Street as we passed Jefferson Rock, John Brown's Fort and over the Potomac River Bridge. A flat, dead straight path hugged the C&O Canal as the sounds of town faded. Juggles slowed, but thirsty, Bush Goggles and I continued, passing the Ed Garvey, Crampton Gap, Rocky Run and Pine Knob shelters. We enjoyed a level section before pulling over after 25 miles to camp near Annapolis Rocks. After resting in towns, I battled hunger. Having eaten well, my stomach thought I must still be in civilization and expected further gratification. After 16 miles, we reached Penmar Park. Noticing a retirement party and tables groaning under copious piles of food, Thirsty hatched a plan. He aimed to procure food, but returned empty-handed and dejected. If civilization couldn't help, the woods certainly did. Summer berries ripened, and we feasted on blackberries and raspberries, wild strawberries, and further north blueberries readied themselves. A lack of fruit didn't bother us again. We ticked off Maryland, entered Pennsylvania, and pulled over at the Tumbling Run shelters. I presumed the double shelters were to meet demand until I noticed a sign on each one, snorers and non-snorers. Juggles arrived, pitching his tent and mosquito net near Bush Goggles' tent, whilst Thirsty and I strung our hammocks. Juggles loved his shelter, which he'd made himself to save money. "It's not my best bit, though," Fozzie announced. "Look at this." He delved into his backpack and pulled out his sleeping mat. Through hikers utilised various items of gear to get rides. Hiker to town commonly appeared on anything large enough to be easily visible. "There's more," he continued, giggling. He turned it over. We collapsed laughing at the writing on the other side, used for amusement and to see hikers' reactions. Psycho killer. We commandeered the picnic table and lit our stoves. We sat for hours, eating like wolves, desperately placating our appetites. Reading the shelter register, I saw a note from Nito, who I'd last seen near Damascus. He'd left the trail after succumbing to tendinitis, which hadn't healed after 5 days' rest. A message from Lady Forward, dated 4 days earlier, spurred me on as I still carried the gauntlet, eager to return it to her. Although we'd hit no major rocky sections in Pennsylvania, they were due. The state was flat compared to most, and we hiked high mileages to counteract any arduous days. Since Harper's Ferry, we'd covered 85 miles in 3 days. An easy trail lacked any serious climbs as we floated along between 1,000 and 2,000 feet, enjoying fine weather. I knew June the 16th would be notable. We rose at 5 a.m. and left by 6 a.m, and I walked with juggles as bush goggles and Thirsty sped off. At mile 1069 we reached a sign, downed packs and celebrated. Appalachian Trail, Maine to Georgia. 1069, Springer Mountain, south. 1069, Mount Katahdin, north. We'd made halfway, but it had arrived too soon. Surely I stood on Springer Mountain only days before. I felt sad, for only weeks away I'd finish on top of Katahdin. But now I approached the second half of the AT with the same excitement as the first.